We're officially past the halfway point of the NHL season, which means the trade deadline is quickly approaching, and for hockey fans, it's the best time of the year. Regardless of what team you cheer for, the deadline and trades in general can change your favorite team's fortunes in more ways than one. Trades allow contenders to acquire that missing piece of their Stanley Cup puzzle. Trades allow sellers to sell hope to their fans of a brighter future with the assets they get in return. And trades allow us and hockey fans everywhere to declare in real time the winners and losers of these massive deals. Which, while a fun exercise in real time, is a much more patient and nuanced conversation in the long run. Sometimes the fruits of a trade's labor can take years to come to fruition, and other times, the impact is instant. And that's why this list we put together is so fascinating. So without further ado, here are the 4 trades that have helped define the NHL season so far, starting with Pierre-Luc Dubois being traded to LA. If you've been following along with the season so far, you saw this one on the list coming all the way from Portage in Maine. Shout out Jesse, it's a Winnipeg thing. On January 23, 2021, the Winnipeg Jets swung for the fences in their Stanley Cup window, trading their highest overall pick in franchise history, Patrik Laine, to the Columbus Blue Jackets for the player literally drafted 1 pick later, Pierre-Luc Dubois. PLD's time in Manitoba didn't exactly work out. He was a solid player for the Jets, set a career high in points last season, but he was unwilling to sign a long-term deal with the franchise. So on June 27th of this summer, he was dealt to LA for an intriguing package, including Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 second-round pick. At the time and after this move, the Jets were viewed as a team in flux. How would these pieces fit together? Were Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele the next names out of town? And was a rebuild on the horizon? The Jets answered all of these questions, first by signing Scheifele and Hellebuyck to long-term deals that proved a commitment to winning, not rebuilding. And now that the season is halfway over, they've exceeded everyone's expectations, and then some, in large part thanks to that trade. Gabe Vilardi's dealt with some injuries, but when he's been healthy, he's a key cog in what many have called one of, if not the best lines in hockey this season. As per Money Puck, of all lines with a minimum of 150 minutes played together, the Ehlers-Scheifele-Vilardi line is in the top 20 in expected goals for percentage, and the Iafallo-Namestnikov-Perfetti line is in the top 10. Vilardi just brings a different element to this Jets team. He's not just great, he's dominant in front of the net and in those surrounding areas, and it complements his line mates very nicely. And on the other line, Iafallo is so good in his own end of the ice, and that's so important, especially when playing with a young player like Cole Perfetti, who is more offensive-minded. Rather than reverting back to a wildcard race, Winnipeg transformed their entire outlook with the PLD trade. But what about LA? Coming off of a great season last year, coupled with the PLD trade, expectations were high. But right now, they're just trying to hold on to a playoff spot, as they and Dubois have struggled mightily. Now, usually it takes some time for players to fit in with their new teams. It's not instant. Dubois' first season in Winnipeg is the perfect example of this, but for what the Kings paid to get him and were hoping that he would become, it's pretty disappointing right now. More than that though, he's been part of 8 different line combinations, which is one of the highest totals of any Kings forward. He's played anywhere from the first line to the fourth line, 20 minutes to 12 minutes a night, and he hasn't been good enough. For a team with cup aspirations, this was that all-in move. The one to put them over the top, to add that game changer with a high ceiling that their lineup didn't feature. Instead though, it's Winnipeg looking like the better team, even after they gave up the perceived best player in that trade. Now, on to deal number 2. And we're going to stick in Canada for this one, but not focus on the Canadian team. On January 30th of 2023, the Canucks traded their captain Bo Horvat to Long Island for a first-round pick that they would later use to acquire Filip Hronek from the Detroit Red Wings. Given what Vancouver's become this season, definitely some tidy work by them, but also by New York. This trade took just a little bit of time for the Islanders to benefit from, but it's been worth it in more ways than one. Let's start with Horvat, who unsurprisingly regressed from his 31 goals with Vancouver to just 7 and 16 points in 30 games upon being traded. That said, as per Money Puck, Horvat only played with Matt Barzal and Anders Lee for a grand total of 20 minutes last season. This year, that's the Isles' top line and one of the best in the league. Of all the lines in hockey that have played at least 100 minutes together, that line is 8th in expected goals per 60. And if we change the minimum to 250 minutes, the only lines that are ahead of them are McDavid's and Crosby's. Barzal, Lee, and Horvat are also 6th in shot attempts per 60 and have scored the 5th most goals of any line in hockey. As good of a player as Lee is, the main connection that's been working so well is what Barzal and Horvat have got going on. Both players are on pace for career highs across the board in almost every major category, and Barzal has assisted on 12 of Horvat's 20 goals this season. So not only did bringing in Horvat net the Islanders a really solid player, but it seemed to unlock Barzal, who's been a point-per-game player just once in his career, back in his rookie season when he won the Calder. Now that the Islanders have brought in a fiery new coach, there's a real chance for them to make some noise in the Metro, and it's not just because of their defensive play. It's because of what these two are doing offensively to keep their team afloat. Speaking of breaking out, let's stick in the Metro for a trade that dates all the way back to March 19th, 2022. At the time, the Flyers had one of the best players available, the belle of the ball in Captain Claude Giroux. And they waited as long as they could to trade him to the Florida Panthers for a package that was headlined by former first-round pick Owen Tippett. At the time, it seemed like an underwhelming package for such a highly sought-after player of Giroux's caliber. But almost 2 years later, anyone that thought that is now eating their words. Tippett, who was drafted 10th overall in 2017, was known for his scoring touch in junior, but anytime he had been called up with the Panthers, it just never translated. Rather than focus on why it didn't work in Florida, though, let's focus on what changed for Tippett in Philly. Last season, Tippett recorded a career-high 27 goals, and as an encore, this year he's on pace for his first 30-goal season of his young career. His playing time has obviously increased since leaving the Sunshine State, and with more of an opportunity to play meaningful minutes in the top 6 and on the power play, confidence and the flashes of the player a lot of people thought he would be in Florida are now more consistently showing. His teammates and his head coach think he's got the potential to be a star, like superstar star. And with a mixtape like this, it's easy to see why. There's a really handy website called All 3 Zones and has many metrics to measure not only a player's ability to create scoring chances, but measure the different ways in which that player creates his offense. Tippett leads all Flyers forwards in scoring chances created at 5-on-5. And that number has grown from last year. His offense tends to come more off the rush, but that doesn't mean he's not good at forechecking and cycling. What he's best at on his team, though, is carrying the puck into the zone. And that makes sense when you watch him. He's one of the fastest players in the league, he's strong on the puck, and he's got great hands. And that translates to a great rush attack. As Torts has admitted, Tippett's game needs some work on the defensive end, but what he can do offensively is special. And it once again proves that situation and opportunity are just as important as talent for some of these prospects. Tippett is a core reason for this Flyers turnaround that has them in a playoff spot. And without his play in his offense, they may not be making as much noise as they are. It's worth noting that Philly is definitely ahead of schedule in what was supposed to be a rebuilding year. So not only is the Giroux trade from 2 years prior helping them in the present, but their future is much brighter with a budding star like Tippett leading the way for the next decade at least, after his well-deserved contract extension. We've got one more trade to talk through, so for the fourth, let's stay in the year 2022. At the time, the Tampa Bay Lightning headed into deadline day with 2 straight Stanley Cup wins, and they were hoping to add some players for a third. As many contending teams do, and few do it better than Tampa, they loaded up, acquiring Nick Paul from Ottawa and Brandon Hagel from Chicago, which is the deal we're going to dissect. Hindsight is a beautiful thing. The cost for Hagel was a couple first rounders and a couple of players, which at the time seemed astronomical for a player on a heater with Chicago, a bad team, and that was a 6th round pick. As is with many players that get traded, but especially with Hagel, who was just getting his feet wet in the NHL for a basement dweller and was thrust into a dynasty, time is a valuable thing to get acclimated. But it didn't take long for the former Red Deer Rebel to prove his worth. In his first full season in Tampa, Hagel scored a career-high 30 goals, and he's on pace for a career-high in points this season. He's also become an important cog in the Tampa machine that's invested a ton in their own roster, whether it be through trades or rewarding their own players with big contracts. For the second season in a row, Hagel's been playing with Braden Point and Hart candidate Nikita Kucherov. Both Hagel's scoring chances per 60 and scoring chance assists per 60 are up from last year. And those numbers are better than players like Jack Eichel and Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Barzal and Sam Reinhart, and in some categories better than Panarin, McDavid, Draisaitl, and Jack Hughes. He also adds a forechecking element that's very complementary to Kucherov as the primary puck handler on that line. The reason this trade is so defining is it helps prolong the Lightning dynasty. They're in a playoff race primarily because this line has accounted for 40% of their goals this season. And yes, Kucherov is the most important ingredient in that sauce, but make no mistake about it. Hagel is that secret spice, that missing ingredient that Nonna adds and will never tell you no matter what. For a guy that's just 25 and can keep getting better, his growth and development is a reminder that Tampa isn't going anywhere in the hockey hierarchy. And it's a reminder that you can't just play anyone with good players. The Lightning have tried. Hagel is among the many success stories that have come into the franchise, but he's even more so considering not only what they gave up to get him, but what he's turned into playing in that environment. And it's not only what he's done individually that's been impressive, but how he's helped that ecosystem not only continue to grow, but maintain success. Those are 4 of the many trades that have defined this season. There are many more out there. Leave your list in the comments and let us know which trades that haven't happened yet that you think will have the biggest impact on the playoff race.